afternoon. I see that it's 1:30. We do have a quorum, and so I will call the October 26th, 2023 Distress Unit Appeal Board meeting to order. Would like to note that this meeting is being conducted and all the requisite notices and public documents are in compliance with the open door law. Again, good afternoon. Moving into our first order of business is the approval of the public meeting minutes of September 20th and then our executive session on October 5th. Those documents were previously distributed. Are there any corrections or clarifications needed on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of September 2023 public meeting and the executive session of October 2026.
There's a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The minutes are adopted. We'll now move into our public comment section of the agenda. We have 4 people signed up. I don't think we have anybody that signed up through the internet here. So our first, I'll just take it in the order that they were signed up. Our first speaker is Attorney Tracy A. Coleman. Welcome.
Thank you, Tom.
As we've done traditionally, we have a 3-minute target for your comments. So welcome and please proceed.
I appreciate that. First of all, I just want to ask DUAB, stop the reconfiguration. And I think of Justin McAdams when he provided testimony before the House of Ways and Means. And he said the moniker of distress in itself is going to cause problems with us retaining teachers, recruitment. So until our school district comes out of this cloud and this moniker of distress, there are so many moving parts that we cannot control. And just think of you. Would you want to go to a company that you said, oh, this company is in bankruptcy? Is that your first choice? No. So it is essential for us to have a superintendent. Because right now, our middle school teachers don't even have a math teacher. And guess what the scores are at Gary Middle School? 0. So how would a good conscience could DUAB constantly let Eric Parrish, Dr. Razor, Miss Nelson, experiment with our kids' education when we see those scores crash? And it was the same thing with Edison Learning. Once you hit 0 for middle school, and I went to the State Board of Education meeting, there was nothing else we needed to hear from you. At that point, we're at 0. And in fact, with MGT, you see in the beginning, our dropout rate went from 0 to 49. So we live in a state that professes to love local control. But then when we come to Gary, Indiana, all of a sudden, these people aren't smart enough to educate their own children. And I would encourage you to read the book Takeover. Because unfortunately, as African Americans, there are some hard truths you just got to understand in America. And when you look at takeovers all across the country, and you look at the supermajorities, you understand that when it gets to African American communities, takeovers become punitive. And then when you look at the statistics at white school districts that are taken over versus Black school districts that are taken over, guess who often loses their elected school board? It's not the white communities, it's the Black communities. And so now we're in a system, our children aren't being educated, and they've stopped coming to school. And I know you want to blame them, and I know you want to blame the parents because you don't dare want to blame Dr. Razor and Eric Parrish and MGT, but the fact is, it's on their watch. And we don't want them anymore. We want our superintendent, we want our governing body, and we want DUAB to respect America and democracy. And then finally, when I went to that school board meeting, first of all, Dr. Razor, that's just disrespectful to say I have to have a learning session. Our children know you got a board for people with doctorates, Juris Doctorate degrees, but then we can't even get our president to call the meeting to order. And then you use your attorney to police the community who has comments. And when your attorney asked for security, it wasn't me making those comments. But I was offended that a senior citizen in that audience who asked questions, who said, I can't see the PowerPoint, got threatened with security being called on her for exercising her basic rights for free speech. Let your children have a school with 0%. And let's see how quiet you would sit there. It's time, DUAB. And I thank you for the opportunity to meet with you after this meeting, because there's so much we have to say, because we love our children. And this is no longer an academic crisis, it's a humanitarian crisis, because our children in Gary aren't able to read, they aren't able to do basic math, and this is a system that takeover has brought us in Gary. And I encourage you, Domingo Morel, look at the statistics, stop punishing our community. We're Indiana citizens, we live here, we deserve to be treated with respect and not punishment. Thank you.
Natalie Ammons?
It's Ammons.
Please correct me. Thank you.
It's Ammons, and good afternoon, everyone. Had a successful trip, and I thank God for being able to be here before you today. During the October 3rd board meeting, the district's emergency manager, Mr. Mike Fraser, recommended the closure of Bailey and Gary Middle Schools because, as he stated, underutilization, poor building conditions, and historical drops in enrollment. The closure also means the sixth grade students will be transferred to elementary school. Westside Leadership Academy will be converted into space for the addition of 7th and 8th graders. Now, according to Mr. Razor, these changes would mean savings of the district of $4 million in operational costs and $2 million in a cost saving by cutting administrative positions, which is also being proposed. Does this decision stem from conversation that he may have had with Paige McNulty or some tutelage that he got back in June? Or are we to believe that Mr. Razor came in with an overnight epiphany saying that we needed to make these immediate changes? I think it's highly unlikely when the public asks for numbers and data and then we're told, we'll get back to you, and it never happens. All of a sudden, Mr. Razor walks in with some information that's not categorized under site-based information and determines that Bailey and Gary Middle School are the immediate source of our problems. I see the recommendation for the proposed closing as not being beneficial. This is like deja vu all over again. MDT allowed our students to decrease in reading and math proficiency. They continue to refuse to accept the responsibility, saying they needed more time, and isn't that an indication that there are some serious issues that we need to take a look at? What about the issues relative to negative outcomes on social, emotional, and academic performances of students with whom they're playing Russian roulette with? Our babies, our communities, our lives. We need this to stop. They're so busy focusing on dollars and giving out partial information that they have overlooked the recommendations and promises to increase academics. According to Dr. Smith, he said the uneven representative state, Dr. Smith, I want to say, the uneven power dynamic created by the age gap between middle schoolers and high schoolers is likely to result in bullying, negative peer pressure, and having students go directly from elementary school to high school eliminates the specialized environment of focused support and attention that the middle schoolers need. Gary citizens were told that we will return to local control. And by the way, we've been there, done this, we've had this configuration, and it was a lot of problems. We were told that we will return to local control and remove the designation of the distress unit. And we have our advisory board in place, and then now we need a superintendent. Okay, is the movement that they're talking about closing schools a tactic to remove focus on the mandatory action that must be taken to regain control of the Gary Community School Corporation, local control? If this is a
Please,
requirement.
you've reached 3 minutes, please wrap up.
Can I wrap up?
Yes.
Okay. There are some things that we must focus on. Making critical decisions, focusing improvement in student learning and proficiency. We must create a culture of high academic expectations for our students. Providing support on below proficiency students, engaging the citizens in the community, and implementing initiatives for improvement that includes user rigorous monitoring and data that will ensure success. Why are you continue to attempt to destroy our lives and privilege our community? It's critical that we focus on the elements to make our city strong and our outcomes great again. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Coleman.
Hello, everyone. I've stayed for the time that they went over, and I wanted to just say welcome, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. And Mrs. Lavetta Tindall.
Good evening. Good evening, yeah. Good afternoon, parents, and board members. I am Mrs. Lavetta Tyndall, a 1966 Gary Roosevelt High School graduate and a tax-paying voting resident of the fine city of Gary, Indiana, USA. Have you ever heard of Haman Bakila? Any of you heard of him? Haman Bakila is the 14-year-old named America's top young scientist who is developing a skin cancer treatment soap. In the grand prize, as the grand prize winner, he will receive $25,000 as a cash prize. In addition to that title and giving that money, I want you to know this gentleman was one of 10 finalists evaluated on ingenuity, innovative thinking, application of STEM principles, demonstration of passion, presentation skills, and ability to inspire others. We, as a community, speak on behalf of the community and the students and the teachers of the Gary School Corporation. We want teachers to be used to teach, nurture, prepare our students to be as articulate, as focused, as prepared as Haman Bakili. We want our students to be tops. And we want people that are in charge of educating and supervising the management of the present school system to have that goal in mind. We want our children to be treated with respect, and we want them to be taught as anyone else would be taught, that is on a track for achieving excellence and becoming globally competent and competitive. Not every student can be a Haman Bakili, but every student should be given the opportunity and tools to achieve their God-given potential. And I hope you all agree on that. Your actions don't indicate it, but we want you to move in that direction. We want our children to ensure that every student experiences literacy proficiency, preparation for opportunities which lead to success in becoming globally competitive. We want our children to measure comparably with students in our neighboring communities, Crown Point and Munster, for instance. I have here, and I want to pass out to you, a list of some of the few Black inventors. If you don't mind, would you pass that around, please? If there are extras, I'd like them back. We need to do better. Mr. Johnston and your board you have the responsibility to manage, supervise the current administration of our school system. And it's not working. And we hold you accountable for that. And that's that you make changes to ensure. Where are the papers? Have they gone around?
They're making their way.
Okay.
We've reached our 3 minutes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Tindall.
There is some research.
Thank you. We've had maybe some late arrivals. Is there anyone else that wished to speak during the public comment period? And there's none online. Okay. Thank you so much. We will move on. Next up is the academic update, and turn it over to Mavis Nelson.
Thank you. Peter there. So while Pete's pulling those up, I want to talk about a couple of things by way of an academic update today. Last time we met, I shared data from iReady, which is our diagnostic assessment we use in the district. We administer at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, December, January, and then at the end of the year, so we can kind of compare. iReady, as a reminder, is a little different than iLearn. iLearn measures grade level proficiency. iReady tells us a little bit more about growth, so it helps us pinpoint where students are. The system then both helps us see to what degree students are growing and in what areas. And then the program has some personalized lessons and kind of based on the diagnostic scores, puts kids on a personalized pathway. And they're able to use that program during intervention lessons. So it's really meeting with the kids where they are. It's one of the number of tools that we use to do that. I shared that data, kind of what we saw last year, growth from beginning of year to end of year. I just wanted to give you all an update on our beginning of year scores this year, because we're using that to make some decisions for the coming year in terms of where we focus professional development, where we support our teachers, and a couple of other exciting initiatives that I'll talk about in a moment. So this is just a quick reminder about iReady. It's taken in kindergarten through 8th grade. And we use it to group students for targeted intervention, as I said. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Now, keep in mind, this is beginning of year diagnostic information, so it's not going to tell us a lot about, what we typically look at student data for, which is kind of how successful is our instruction. This is telling us where are our students starting out the year. Here's a quick breakdown of how those results came back. You can see the dark blue on this side is mid or above grade level, so those are students who are on or above their grade level. The lighter blue is also on grade level, but kind of earlier, not above. And then as you can see, there's a significant number of students, more as you go up into the higher grades, who are significantly below grade level. You can see some interesting trends here, though. 5th grade is where we see a significant kind of backslide heading into the middle years. One thing that I didn't show here, but that we're looking at closely in the district with our academic team is it'll tell us kind of by domain where students are. So we can look at the reading tests and see what part of reading are they struggling with. We actually have seen a lot of growth over the years in phonemic awareness, which is a key part of foundational reading skills, but we see a real gap in phonics. So we have an upcoming professional development day on November 7th. We're really focusing in on phonics instruction, just as an example of how we use that data. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Here it is by school. You can see that there are some common trends. We have significantly higher number of students below grade level at our 2 middle schools, Gary Middle, which is the second row, and Bailey STEM, which is at the bottom. They're not alphabetical order, not grade level order. We can see across schools there are some differences. Banneker is a little bit stronger, but in general, we've got a lot of kids who are below. Oh, this is beginning of year to beginning of year. So you can see that we are in a really similar spot at the beginning of this year as we were last year. Kids are kind of coming to us similarly with a big chunk, 1 grade level below and another third or so, 2 or more grade levels below. It's kind of remarkable actually how similar the numbers are beginning of year to beginning of year. We can go very quickly through the map. You see really similar trends. Very much like the iLearn data that we've looked at previously, as well as the iReady data that I shared last meeting. Same trend. We see similar patterns in math, but lower ultimately. I had a conversation with Mr. Miller about that last week. Why is math so much harder? I think math in general, 2 big things. It's much more sequential. So if you look at the standards for English language arts, they spiral. They're pretty similar year over year, and the expectations just get higher. So if you miss a year, it's a little easier to remediate and catch kids up. Also, students are more likely, if we think about the COVID years, to have been in a text-rich environment, to be, developing their communication skills, their comprehension skills. sort of independently at home and just out in the world, they're less likely to be learning pre-algebra, right, in their day-to-day. Also, I think parents are often less equipped to help with math at home, so that's a challenge. And then those skills build on each other. So if you miss a year of math, those skills don't really come back up. So we'd have to really fill in those gaps, or else kids are going to struggle, which is what we see in this data. Here it is by school, again, similar, a little bit higher at Banneker. The other elementaries are all kind of in the same spot. And we see, you know, upper grades, they're doing a little bit better, a few more kids on grade level, but still ultimately, I think the story is very clear. We have a lot of kids who are quite behind. Yep, and almost exactly the same story here. So what I really wanted to talk about before we spend, I think, the balance of the time talking about some proposed recommendations is just a little bit of what we're doing about the data we just saw. So a lot of how we tackle this is through working with our teachers, through professional development. I talked about, we noticed the gap in phonics, so we do some PD on that. We're working really hard. A huge focus in the district is on small group remediation. It's a challenging strategy from a classroom management lens and even a planning lens, having to kind of plan mini lessons that are targeted at kids-specific skill gaps. That's what we're really working on with the bulk of our professional development and coaching that teachers are receiving. However, we know looking at that data, it's just not enough. We need to do more for our kids. So I'm excited. This isn't 100% complete yet, but we're working hard to get high impact tutoring to our kids this year. Targeting sort of a pilot in 3rd grade reading, 6th grade math, and 9th grade math. And the principles of high impact tutoring, but there's, you know, kids have been receiving tutoring for decades as a strategy. But there's a lot of research since COVID in particular around the impact of what they're calling, they used to call it high dosage tutoring, but there, as you can see, more principles to it than just the dose. I think that was the language shift to high impact. A couple of things that make this unique to compare it to kind of traditional tutoring initiatives. This is, you know, what the research says needs to be true in order for it to have the very high effect size that we see. So it needs to be at least 3 times per week, no more than 4 students per tutor. Tutors need to be like selected. It needs to be a selective process for tutors. They need to receive real training and support. There needs to be a clear focus, and the research actually supports the spread of the pilot that I just named, which is early grades focused on reading, upper grades focused on math. There needs to be constant informal measurement. Kids need to have a relationship with their tutor. We can't just give them somebody new every time. They need to leverage high quality curriculum. It has to be during the school day. So when tutoring is offered after school, that automatically self-selects the group of kids that we're going to get, right? When it's leveraged during the school day, you can have it much more integrated and aligned with what's happening in the classroom. Although a lot of the research shows, obviously, an in-person tutor is wonderful to have. There's a lot of good emerging research on the effectiveness of virtual tutoring, and prioritization is kind of the last one. Are we being clear about who we're targeting and why? This has been a challenge to make happen in Gary because, you know, we've named the teacher shortage as an ongoing challenge, similar with tutors. Oh, you know, you would often want to pull tutors from like universities, schools of education, where they can get some experience working with kids, but those schools just don't have as many people, particularly in our region, as they once did. There have been some tutoring initiatives in the past that haven't been successful for that reason. Then we've leveraged our own teachers after school, but that doesn't kind of meet the same need. So I've been working with an organization that does this exact type of tutoring in a virtual setting. They're very selective with the tutors that they pick. They use high quality materials. They work with our teachers on selecting kids. So that's why we're going to try a pilot this year. I'm hesitant to kind of have every kid work with a tutor before we're able to see if this platform and the organization works as well as they say they do. But that is, my hope is that we can do a pilot this year and really, you know, tweak it, figure out how it works within our own systems, hopefully see some good results and some real student growth, and then leverage those to hopefully work on some outside funding to keep it going long-term in Gary. There are some sources of funding specifically for high impact tutoring. One of those is through the University of Chicago, and I've been in conversations with them, but that's kind of my long-term hope is that we could have a sustainable high impact tutoring program in the district, because make our kids need that. They're going to need it for some years to come. The impacts of what we're seeing are, will be felt for many, many years in the district. So that's one thing that I'm excited about. I'm eager to be able to work with teachers to say, we're going to expect you to do some small group differentiation and plan these mini lessons that are really targeted, but we're also going to give you a really robust additional support to work with some of your kids who have the highest need. And the last thing I'll say is just that we also want to work on a community literacy initiative. We've heard from many members of the community that there are folks who want to volunteer, who want to help, folks who want to know a little bit more about how to help their kids at home. And so that's a need that we want to help meet. This is very early in the planning stage. So we have a couple of events planned. We're planning to do a family night every month for the rest of the school year. We'll do some fun themes. We've got some ideas around. We'll do some parent education nights. Again, this is kind of in the infancy planning stage, but want to make sure we're breaking the community and parents too. What questions can I answer?
Questions for Mavis?
When we were looking at the reading scores, when we read this picture, take your time. You know, that there was some backsliding in fifth grade. Well, since this is beginning of the year, it's actually the backsliding in fourth grade. Now, do I read at third grade level? The saw is that you learn to read up a lot more than to read more. So I mean, there's a connection there. But we probably need to see some other years to see if that is really where that point is, or if this is just into that particular. Regardless, so when you get someone who's not reading at level of third grade, I mean, how do we differentiate? What do we attack that?
Yeah, so we have expanded a lot of our science of reading training for teachers to fourth and fifth grade. We did it with our K2 teachers on the September 29th, which was our last professional development day. We're going to target our upper elementary teachers this time. We'll continue with some of the early grades too, but give a big dose to our upper grades teachers so that they understand how to implement some of those pieces like phonics, like phonemic awareness, so that they might not be doing that isn't in a core curriculum at that grade level. We also have a supplementary curriculum for phonemic awareness called Haggerty. We used it last year in early grades and saw some real benefits of that. We purchased it for our upper grades and have been training them on that same program so that they can keep building up those skills that ideally a fourth and a fifth grader would already have, but we know from the data that our students don't all have. So that's one piece of it. And then giving them we have reading interventionists at each of the elementary schools who are also doing pullouts in those grades for those kids who are severely behind.
Tracy?
Yeah, on the high impact tutoring, since it'll be a pilot this year, do you have a sense of how many students might be able to participate?
We're working with the principals to decide exactly how we want to pick the kids and target them. The way we've been ballparking it is basically 50% of those classes, so that we can pick kind of our highest need, but large group of kids. We didn't want it to be too narrow. We don't want it to be every kid. We're envisioning it as, something that some students are working on, like iReady as an example, self-directed program, teachers working with a small group, and some of the kids in the classroom with the highest need are working with their tutors. So thinking about 50% of the kids in each of those 3 grade levels.
Great. Other questions? Mavis, and I'm still getting familiar with the iReady reports here.
And there's no relationship between iLearn, iRead, and iReady.
Right.
Surprisingly, they sound like the same brand name, but.
So, but as far as the strategy goes on the high impact tutoring, I think you had sort of characterized the reading as a spiral effect, that it's easier to keep building off of what you learned, but that didn't translate into the math, that if you miss a year, then it's hard to sort of reconstruct that foundation. Then your strategy, though, that you've laid out here for math is the tutoring in the higher grades, though, 6th and 8th. So to me, as a lay person or person, this seems like a disconnect to me.
Yeah.
So why is that?
No, it's a fair point. I think a couple of things. part of it is we're trying to structure a pilot program, right? So when you're thinking about a pilot, you want to pick places where you'll be able to measure and you want to give it the best chance of success. So we're also looking at where do we have teachers who can work with the kind of small group instruction piece of it, who can be really engaged with the tutors and managing it, so that we can come up with a good model for what it can look like to expand out later. Reality is, every grade level, all of our students could benefit from working with a tutor, right? We can certainly use it in every content area at every grade level. So we kind of have to prioritize. I think if we did that, which is something we discussed, just going all in, I would really like to see, is this company able to live up to what they're saying before we give them that much money? And will we be able to support the teachers if we do everybody all at once versus model grade levels? The research does support kind of upper grades math, and those are some key hinge points for math instruction. Algebra readiness is a big pain point, so that was kind of the ninth grade piece. Also wanting to have a pilot at the high school level, so we can kind of see how it works in the schedule and things like that. Same at the middle level. So we wanted to have kind of one in each school type. So that was some of the logic to it. It's partially based on student need, but the reality is our students need it at every grade level. So we also look at, how could this pilot work in a way that would be most informative for next year?
Thank you. You have any questions? Thank you. Move on to the operations update.
Mike, thank you. Good afternoon. About a month ago, we unveiled a proposal that is in its infancy to the presented it to the board, to the community, around the district's sustainability and long-term, if we think systemically about what that looks like. We, again, probably has been stated before, we're going on year 3 of solvency within the district. Long-term, we show just a razor-thin margin of sustainability over the next 10 years. A razor-thin sustainability that we're not really comfortable with, because one oops, one HVAC going down, one large insurance claim, and we border on the edge of insolvency. And long-term, that's not a state we want to leave the district in. So we also see a declining enrollment. Last time we spoke, we were ballparking, we were about the same enrollment. Well, we're about 80 kids down this year, which isn't a dramatic decrease, but still has the district hovering under 4,000 kids. So as a team, Ms. Nelson and I, with the district administration, started putting our heads together. What systemically makes sense? What systemically makes sense, also keeping the care, welfare, safety, and security of our kids first in mind. How can we provide more opportunity, better outcomes? And then also, what puts the district in a position to have financial sustainability for not just 5, 10 years into the future? And also gives the district the ability to ride out any future enrollment drop, any oops, as we might call it. So have some information that we provided to the community and to the board on Tuesday night. And we'll let you kind of see where our thinking is. And I want to be very clear, we've not made a decision. We have a proposal that we think is the best step forward, but we've not made a decision. So you can see that the utilization rate of our buildings is, at best, 76%. From my past experience in previous work, I can tell you that a school building should be ideally anywhere from 75 to 115% utilized. Anything below 75% utilization, unless it's a one-off. And what I mean by a one-off is we have one high school. So you're gonna have high school. So what its utilization, but you can see even Westside Leadership Academy, we're at 53% utilization of the building. But anywhere from 75 to 115% is what that utilization should look like in a school where it's not a financial pull, not a human resources pull on a district. So you can see we're currently across the board, all but one school not optimally utilized. Next slide, please. You also, there's no other way to say it. What we're doing in middle school right now is not working. It's just not. And we need a reset upon that. Additionally, next slide, please. Sorry. Oh, you're fine. Our highest discipline rates are also at middle school. Now, what I also want to point out on this slide is Westside Leadership Academy is figuring something out. You can see year over year, almost a 200 case drop in suspensions. So this is leading our thinking in a certain direction. Also, feedback that we've received, next slide, please. We want to think about, again, how can we have better opportunities for our students? How can we support their social emotional learning? How can we have more students with more experienced teachers? How do we best use the facilities we have? And it's not the purpose of a school district. That is to educate the students in the community. But if there's not long-term financial stability, we're unable to do that. So how do we set the district up for long-term financial stability? Next, please. So we got together with the team and we brainstormed ideas. And the math is pretty simple. 3,700 plus students, 10 buildings. So if you just did straight law of averages, that's 370 kids. We're basically tying up $4 million a year in operational expenses for more schools than we need. So we threw out some ideas and bantered around them. One was close Bethune, which is our early childhood facility, which we don't receive early childhood funding for. So there was that. That was one of our thoughts, and we'll talk about some pluses and minuses of that in a little bit. Close both middle schools and create K-8s at all of our schools. That was another thought we had. Another was, since both of our middle schools are basically at basic minimum staffing, combine the two middle schools into one location. And then the proposal that we landed on to bring forward was to create K-6 elementary schools. We've got a lot of anecdotal input from families saying we would have stayed in our elementary school if they would have offered sixth grade. And then creating a 7-12 junior senior high at Westside Leadership Academy. So I'm going to talk through each of those options and then moreover on why we decided on the one that we did. Next, please. So closing Bethune was thrown out, and there were no, it was one of these, there's no bad idea type of situations. Throw ideas out. Pretty quickly shows us shooting ourselves in the foot. So, you know, what we feel like we get from Bethune is a lot of efficacy around early childhood education. If we were to split that out to 5 elementary schools, it's been our experience that they become islands and isolated. There's not as much efficacy. The other thing is as well, there's a high cost to having early childhood in a building, and to things that seem as minimal as needing to have an independent playground, which can be anything from $50,000 to $100,000 for a playground, and then putting a high fence around that playground, and that's a federal mandate around early childhood. So we slid off that one pretty fast. And Bethune also has a very, very high regard. Some of our highest enrollment is actually early childhood. Next, please. I'm a huge proponent of K-8. However, if a building isn't designed to be K-8, and if there are not staffing challenges, which there are, K-8 becomes very hard to live up to the efficacy of departmental junior high. And would need to hire multiple staff across multiple buildings. Not saying K-8 is completely off the table, but we don't see it as tenable. Next slide. Something we've gotten a fair amount of feedback on is combining the 2 middle schools and making 1 middle school. The biggest issue we have there is our 2 middle schools are located on the borders of the district, as geographically far apart as any 2 schools are in the district. So we feel combining them at either location could impact enrollment, could the other thing that we feel like combining the 2 middle schools in 1 location still doesn't do is provide more opportunities for our kids, because we have so many emergency permit teachers in our middle schools right now. Additionally, we did a facilities assessment of our 10 buildings, and our 2 middle schools rank 8 and 10 in condition. So the deferred maintenance on those buildings is $4 to $5 million if critical deferred maintenance that we could potentially avoid as well. Next slide, please. And where we landed in the proposal that we're making is to transition our elementary schools to K-6 and to move Westside Leadership Academy into a junior senior high. And I'll be honest, we've received a fair amount of feedback, actually a more than fair amount of feedback on that, namely around safety and security of younger students and older students. That's something we feel we can solve for. We also feel that it's an unfair characterization of our students at Westside Leadership Academy, as behavior has improved dramatically in the school. And what we see at Westside, at GMS, and at Bailey are 3 buildings that are minimally staffed, 3 schools that are minimally staffed. We feel if we bring those 3 schools together, we can take advantage of an economy of scale to provide more opportunity, better outcomes for kids. GMS is our performing arts middle school. We struggle to staff performing artists. Not the case at Westside Leadership Academy, where I was going to say best in region, but probably best in class, best in state performing arts program. Great opportunities for our kids. Bailey's a STEM certified school. We can bring that STEM certification to Westside Leadership Academy. As I stated earlier, finances should not be what drives academics. But end of the day, we have to be able to live within our means and take advantage of opportunities. The $4 million and change that we save with this proposal, in addition to some central office reconfiguration that bumps that number closer to $6 million. That's not one-time savings. That's year over year over year over year. And that number increases year over year as what those things would have cost. The other thing as well is we remove $4 to $5 million of deferred maintenance from the books. That puts the district in a position to incur good debt. And what I mean by good debt is potentially building new schools, major renovations to the buildings we have, and additions that we've asked for. The other thing that $6 million does, and I'd like to say strategically identified $6 million, there it is, that's what we were shooting for. That's essentially what we get from the referendum every year. So if Gary were not to repass the referendum in 2028, we've helped the district sustain through that. Now, again, at that point, in a very razor thin margin. Pete, I kind of went off slides there, but they all, yeah, they didn't catch up.
You want to go?
Yeah, just keep, yeah, go. Next. And one more. Yeah, the other reason is, and this is a question we've been asked in the community. The board is about to take control. There's about to be a superintendent. Why right now? Well, why right now is because the other thing that we've been given many cautionary warnings about is, well, this was tried before. But it was a decision made, frankly, at the end of the school year for the next upcoming school year to put the two together. But the more why right now is we have $20 million of unallocated ESSER funding, COVID relief. We have the ability to do it right now. Come July, when the board fully takes governance, come July, when there's a superintendent, we could try, but we're not going to do it for this year. And it's going to be pretty hard within 5 months of time to allocate $20 million of funding. So the other why right now is there's never a wrong time to make a right decision. And we need to do what's best for kids. And we've met several times with Mr. Scott of the high school, who's in full support of this movement. And why right now is we have time to do it right. Even less about the money, and the money is important. We have time to do it right. We have 10 months to plan for this. So we're continuing to get community feedback throughout the rest of next month. We intended our December DUAB meeting and our December school board meeting to make our final recommendations. But that's why we feel strongly about this one. And additionally, what I didn't talk about is it also puts the new superintendent and the new school board in a situation where the first decisions they're making aren't the financial stability of the school district and its potential survivability. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Dr. Rizzo?
Yeah, I've had a few. One of the slides you mentioned that by closing both middle schools and making a 7-12, that there would be significant financial investments needed at that time. What are you envisioning there?
What?
And what do you mean by significant?
Well, I think, when I talk about a junior, senior high, I'm really envisioning 2 schools in one building.
Yeah, school within a school is the way it works.
Yeah.
2 schools, you can't combine students. I've been in this situation. Where I combined grade levels, and you have to create wings, or you have to keep kind of an isolated situation and a separate administration. You can combine some efficiencies on the front office, but they're still going to have their own discipline. They're going to have, you can't have a 7-12 principal.
No, absolutely. So some of the significant expenses, a second cafeteria. And now, one of the advantages we have is we have a lot of room in West Side. But a second cafeteria, auxiliary physical education spaces, those type of things, as well as, obviously the building wasn't designed to be a 7-12. So creating a separation, we actually walked the building for, I want to say a 3rd or 4th time, but yesterday with Mr. Scott, who is the West Side High School principal, of where we feel like some clear differences can be made. And one of the things we're exploring right now, and it's kind of it's something I've been referring to as the curse of transparency, is if you come out with an idea early and share people with your thinking, you don't have everything completely fleshed. Do we have separate transportation, even though it's the same building? Is there enough efficiency based upon what we currently are doing that you're going on different buses?
Are you currently a 3-tier system? So you have so you're just on a 2. So which 2 are on the same tier?
Middle and high.
Middle and high. Okay.
Yeah. But, currently we have buses going to 3 different locations where 3 into 2 saves transportation money, but
I don't know of a school district in Indiana that is doing well transportation.
No.
Potentially operationally. Having a 2-tier system where middle and high you've got a middle and high school student in the same household, you got two buses pulling up, that just makes no sense.
Yeah, it is, well, one of the things that we've also discussed, again, we're early on, is we've discussed through efficiency, now can we afford a bus monitor for every bus?
You would need that, absolutely.
Yeah, where, you know, and the other thing, I'm a former middle school principal. Middle grade kids need structure. And it's the biggest mistake we make in the middle grades is thinking they have it all figured out. Middle school needs to look a lot more like elementary school than high school. And, you know, part of the minus 10 months we have, if this is the route we choose, is getting those structures in place.
I would also challenge you to make sure that you've thought about all co-curricular and extracurricular scheduling.
Yeah.
I ran into that challenge, and it was, you know, you don't want the high school to take priority over everything, because you want your middle school students almost to have the same, if not more, opportunities so they can develop those and those interests, and that's what brings them to school.
Yeah. Well, and we see this as an opportunity, frankly, to compete with the charters of what opportunities can we bring to the kids that they're already getting in middle school, at the middle ages, at the 7th and 8th grade level now, that were only high school opportunities prior. And, you know, and like I said, probably best in state visual performing arts. We have the STEM, and now through the economy of scale of staffing in one location, you know, hopefully, well, not hopefully, definitely more opportunities, and then that should lead to better outcomes.
Talked a lot about the challenges by combining the 7-12. What challenges are there for adding the 6th grade back to elementary?
The challenge, we have a couple buildings where space is going to be an issue, but you know, as you could have seen from our chart, our most utilized buildings at 76%. And I was actually there yesterday. They were clamoring for keeping the 6th grade. It will be much less of a challenge than the 7-12, but again, having the time to plan around it, huge.
Then my last question was, you presented the option of combining the two middle schools into one, and I get the logistics on the geographic challenges, but is there one, and you said both of those buildings have significant needs. Is there one building though that is better than the other, or are they both very similar as far as their?
We have worked through, we worked through options yesterday, probably, and which is a major issue in Gary, and something I didn't mention. A major issue in Gary is what do you do with abandoned and vacant buildings? If it would be the will of what we pick from the community's input, if that's the direction the board leads, if this isn't gonna work, just go one middle school. Bailey is probably where that would be, because we feel like the Gary Middle School property would be a more favorable property for purchase. Additionally, you run into, the other thing you run into, and it's valid questions, sunk cost. We've put considerable amounts of money over the last few years into both Bailey and Gary Middle School. Bailey has more sunk cost in it. So if we did have to choose one to locate at, that would be the school. But again, we're on opposite edges of the district.
I just like to make a comment. More of a comment where I came from. I came from a product of a K-5 school that then went to a 6-12 school. And they were combined. I went to school and had no problem. Subsequently, after graduating and later on, they combined the sixth grade when they consolidated the elementaries, two of the elementaries that were in the district, and combined the sixth grade into it without any problem into it, and then made the junior high school and split the high school. And so where the junior high and the high schools, they actually put a barrier up between. But I mean, while I was there was really no problem, but I mean, times change. But then they became a barrier where they had a separate junior high principal and a separate senior high principal. So I mean, it can, they still shared the same gymnasium, they still shared the same track, same facilities, but they can cohabitate in the same environment. It can work out if the facilities are right for the child. It's where you break that off at, as long as you have the right capacity for it, so.
And you know, it's kind of, again, the why now is we have the ability to finance this right now.
Yeah.
To make it work to the point you're thinking. My wife worked at Evansville North Junior Senior High. There's a high school and a junior high, and separated in the middle, completely divided off. And the two can work together. And high schoolers and junior high kids aren't mingling throughout the day. It's really taking advantage of a flagship facility that we have and concentrating resources as well as financial resources, but also human resources for opportunities for children. Because where those opportunities flourish are the extracurricular, the co-curricular, the extras that a small percentage of utilization can't afford you at a school.
Other questions? You'd mentioned the ESSER funds being the resource will probably be used for any configuration, any of these options,
Yes.
right? There's going to be investments that are required. That is, if I remember correctly, through 2024.
Yes.
We're in the last sort of ESSER 1, 2, and 3. We're in 3, correct? Okay. And unlike, I'm more familiar with some of the other federal funds. Is that an obligation date or a spend by date?
I think is it a spend by?
Application is September, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's obligating your
Obligated by September.
September, but spend by the end of the calendar year,
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
Okay. And so, again, regardless of the path forward, there's a lot of work to be done, is both on capital and assessing operational costs that are going to be going on long beyond 2024.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and again, it's all about giving the district a very long runway of sustainability.
Thank you for the thorough presentation. We'll move on to the operations update, the financial update, which I think we have both, we're going to have a budget review eventually, but first, I think the 1065.
You're given the transactions for the school improvement fund in September. We've got 10 transactions there. They are related to the roofing project, some signage, parking lots, as well as some plumbing and check repairs. The statute just requires the board to approve those monthly.
Any questions for Pete? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the 1065 claim as presented in the amount of 182,008.94.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. There a second. If there aren't any questions, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The claims are adopted or approved. Next up is the 2024 budget.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Daniel Dalton, Senator Dalton of the School Advisors. Last month, Steve was here and gave a presentation to introduce the budget to you all. We had great dialogue a month ago, big questions were raised, concerns, et cetera, and then we moved on. A couple days after that meeting, a couple concerns were raised. So we ended up having to make some adjustments to the budget, which I'll go over here in just a minute or two. Now, before I jump into the slides, I do want to update the board on the adjusted timeline we had to set because we had to unadvertise our budget, make some fixes, set new dates, and then re-advertise it. So we held a public hearing at Gary on October 11th. It was a good meeting, good questions, concerns. On Monday, October 30th, we'll be meeting back up there for the budget adoption. So that's just the updated timeline. And now, Pete, if you want to go to the first page, I guess second page. All right, the education fund. So this was one of the funds that we had to make adjustments in. You will notice first off that the bottom line budget number is the same exact number as it was last month. But what we did not include, and Commissioner Shackle brought up a good point about this, was the transfers from education to operations and the transfers from education to 1065 were not included as physical line items in the gateway budget forms. So we had to make that adjustment. We decreased all the other line items proportionally in order to maintain the same bottom line budget. So those two transfers are now included. So we're all set on education. Are there any questions on that before I move on? Okay, all right.
Just point out, I just realized that the transfer 1065, you recall we changed on the debt side.
Oh, okay, so that,
I think that number on the education fund needs to be 3.5.
the typo on the PowerPoint, but
That's right.
it's correct in Gateway.
Yeah.
So that transfer should be 5.4 million as opposed to 3.5 million. All right, operations fund. Next slide, please. So this budget remained the same. As you see, we're asking for a $30 million levy due to our circuit breaker impact. We're looking at only maintaining $3 million cut. That's typical year over year. Operations receives transfers in for a referendum from education and just to kind of assist that education transfer in is 15% of the basic grant. All of this is what Steve covered last month, and so nothing on this slide has changed. So next slide, please. Operating referendum remained the same. This fund doesn't do a whole lot except for collect property taxes and transfer it all out, most all of it out to education and to operations. So education will receive 1.2 million and operations will receive 9.1 million. And then on the next slide, this is another fund where we had to make an adjustment because, well, let me start out by saying our levy that we were asking for was $10 million a month ago. As you see now, it's 15 million. Our budget was $7.7 million last month. Now it's $12.2 million. So the changes that were made have to do with the fact that the 9 deferred common school loans should have been maintained at the 2020 budget amount number for the last several years. And so what we did is we took the delta of 2020 to 24 budgeted amounts for those 9 deferred common school loans, and we plugged that into 2024 so that we can push back up our monthly transfers to 1065 to maximize the amount we're putting into that fund for capital expenses. And so that was a pretty big change, and the reason why we had to re-advertise our budget is because this debt service fund, the amount increased, so we couldn't just go with it. So that concludes the PowerPoint. If there's any questions on those two changes, on those two funds, I'd be happy to go into more detail.
So the cumulative change from 20 to 24, all along, the benchmark was 2000, or 2020.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any questions? No questions? With pleasure, we need to approve the budget. So is there a motion to approve the budget, 2024 budget?
I move that we approve the budget as amended and presented today.
There's a motion for the approval as amended and presented. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any further questions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Budget's adopted. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, we have the authorization of expenditures approved by the executive director.
We've got a couple of contracts to review from the last month. First is for repairs to the boiler at West Side. The vendor there was Hudson Boiler and Tank. The total cost was $147,860, and that was paid for through ESSER funds, which fits into the part that we last month. And the second one was for floor matting at actually all the buildings in the district. This was through Home Depot. Also, through three funds, the total was $38,385.68. This was actually an ADA compliance where at the entry and exit to buildings, you have a kind of ramp for disabled access, and so these are special mats that allow for that slope at every building. So that's it.
Any questions for Pete? Thank you. Next item is the consideration of the MGT contract benchmarks. This was, I think, a continuation of the discussion we had last month.
That's right. So these are for benchmarks from the 2022-23 school year. We dealt with the bulk of those last month. There's a couple that we're looking at today for I-learn growth. And so what we're measuring here is any students that went from either below proficiency to approaching, or approaching to at, or at and to exceeding. And so on the ELA, students did reach that tier 2, 15.4%, 15.5% moved to a higher level. Unfortunately, math benchmark was not reached. And so the contract would say that the benchmark is $85,000 earned. I remind the board there's one more benchmark that we're going to have to deal with in a few months. Graduation rate, what we're waiting on there is for the Department of Education to audit that figure.
So that'll be at a December or
Probably January. I think usually December timeframe, if those get audited. Come on, sir.
any questions on the benchmark proposal? Is there a motion to approve the payment for the I-Learn ELA growth performance?
I move that we approve the $85,000 benchmark for the increase in the percentage of students in grades 4 through 8.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is adopted. Thank you very much. that comes to the end of our agenda. Is there any other business to come before the Distress Unit Appeal Board today? Hearing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.